Welcome back, Honors, and welcome back to this beautiful Wednesday midway through your break.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
Haha, it's an old school vine that not a lot of people know about, but it's one of my personal favorites. Now, really quick thing though, okay, we're now getting into the bulk of your unit about the Renaissance, right? We're now going to be discussing, like, what is the Renaissance? What defines the Renaissance? And we spent the last flip talking about kind of where the Renaissance came from, right? We talked about how we believe that the Black Death kind of caused the Renaissance. We believe that the Black Death led directly to the Renaissance due to the fact that economic growth is going to spike out. It's going to hinder the growth of the population, which is going to create more jobs. Well, not more jobs. It's going to create actual more pay for certain wages, and your labor becomes worth more, and things like that are going to happen. And also, because what's going to be left behind is a mostly wealthy class that was able to avoid death by the plague, so they're going to start buying all these goods coming out of Italy, and blah, 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 blah. But the big thing, though, is we're getting into now is what the Renaissance is. We're now going to be talking about as much as we can in about 25-ish minutes, talking about, like, really, what is the Renaissance? Where is it going? What does it mean? What makes it different from the Middle Ages? And some historians argue that it's not even a real thing. I disagree a little bit because I think periodization of history is important. But some historians are just like, well, the Renaissance never truly happened. The Middle Ages just developed. Blah, 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 blah. Well, look, we're going to teach the Renaissance because every single history teacher probably for the rest of your life is going to believe that the Renaissance is a thing. All right? So now, going forward, though, what does that word mean? Renaissance. What's it mean? Well, first of all, it's a French word, right? It's a French word, and the word itself means rebirth, right? A rebirth. Well, what's being reborn, right? So, like, what is being rebirthed? Because Europe didn't go anywhere, right? And technically, you could argue that Europe was reborn following the fall of Rome due to the fact that barbarians are going to resettle all of Europe, and they're going to create a Europe that is much more their own, leading to the cultural and, like, geographic borders of Europe that we now know today. Well, what we mean by rebirth is it's the attributes, intelligence, and ideas of the Greeks and Romans that is being reborn, right? It is all of these things that died with the Greeks and the Romans are going to be coming back under the Renaissance period, right? These really intelligent, amazing things that the Romans and the Greeks came up with that are listed right here, okay? So yes, you need these. Yes, this is important. So go ahead and do me a favor. You can hit pause. Good job. Okay, so now that we're back, right, since you hit pause and you took a second to write these down, because I am going to move through these things pretty quickly, right? So when you're looking back at the Greeks and the Romans, there are these medieval historians that argue that this argument is invalid, but I think they are invalid because they're trying to stick up for a time period that literally only 4% of people knew how to read and write, which they then argue back with only like 8% of people in Rome knew how to read and write. Well, look, that's double, okay? So take that. Now, big thing though, when we're getting into this, is you got to understand the Greeks, they came up with philosophy. Like literally, Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Diogenes, which we'll talk about when you start doing your artwork presentations. He's in the School of Athens, for any of y'all that don't know, or whoever has the School of Athens. He's the guy sitting on the steps like this. He's reclined back and he's reading something like that. Like philosophy, the idea of questioning existence existed and was created in ancient Greece. Historiography. Herodotus was the very first historian of all time. He was a Greek, right? Theater, the way we understand it, was invented in Greece. Even the theater symbol to this day dates back to ancient Greece. With the two masks, the one smiling and the one frowning, goes back to the masks that were used during the ancient Greek theater era, right? Democracy and the ideas of voting were created in ancient Greece. You know how we just got done with an election? Yeah, that concept of voting for your president or your elected officials is actually a hybrid of Roman and Greek government, right? Architecture, the Olympics, science, and mathematics are going to be created in ancient Greece. And in Rome, you're going to have an organized military, republic, roads, infrastructure, aqueducts, sewage system, 3-branch governments, Roman law, and even the Julian calendar that we still sort of use. All right, so we actually use the Gregorian calendar now, but it's pretty much the Julian calendar plus or minus a few days, right? So, and it's just slightly adjusted. Now, really quick though, look at this intelligence. Look at this growth. Look at this mind-blowing amount of stuff. If we were to make a list of the Middle Ages, you would just be like, Well, the church, that's good. And it is. It's a good thing that the church grew. And feudalism? Feudalism's terrible, right? Feudalism's awful, and it basically took poor people and said, work here or else, right? So it's what you got to look at it as is like the Middle Ages. It's called the Middle Ages because it's a transition, right? It's a transitional period between the fall of Rome and what we now refer to as the modern era, right? So the modern era starts with the Renaissance, okay? So the Middle Ages is like 1,000 years worth of time that we had to cover in one unit, which is mind-blowing. But it's 1,000 years worth of time where we talk about the fall of Rome leading up to what you now known as like Europe, right? Europe and Western civilization existing out of that continent. The only real things that happen is it establishes the dominance of the Roman Catholic Church in the area of Europe. And also, one big thing that you got to remember as well is that it wasn't just Western Europe. Eastern Europe was doing a little bit better, right? The Byzantines held on to a lot of Roman intelligence. They still continued to make art. This right here is very emblematic of Byzantine art. It's a mosaic style art. It's not three-dimensional. It's kind of unproportional and stuff, but still, it's a very beautiful form of art, and it's something very that's their own. You know, in the Byzantine Empire, you had the Hagia Sophia being built. You had, like, the Constantinople being very wealthy and prominent. You had a lot of trade going on there, but in Western Europe, you were seeing kind of some crusty stuff, and it was a little gross. But the big thing though you got to remember is that when you're derivating or when you're delineating between the two theaters of the Middle Ages, we're mostly talking about Western Europe right now. So like the kingdoms that you now, or the countries that you now consider dominant in the European pantheon, England, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, places like that, they were having a rough time. They were at a very rough go of things, right? Because the Byzantine Empire was headquartered in Turkey, modern-day Turkey, which some people argue isn't even European. So, like, it's really up to you, though. The Middle Ages, though, is a period of, limited learning, reorganization, and redevelopment. It's kind of like these barbarians were starting from square one, and they had to then counteract and act through what the Greeks and the Romans had done, but they had lost it, right? The Middle Ages, though, is going to see a massive amount of growth in economies, right? Now, ironically enough, economics and wealth and prosperity were big under the Romans, but when the Romans fell, they then went from amazing to so going from a terrible economy to a great one, you're going to have to see that growth, right? So during the High Middle Ages, though, you're going to particularly see a huge amount of growth during the Middle Ages, right? And a big thing you're going to see in the Middle Ages is a rise of these things called guilds, which we'll bring up here again in a second. Okay, we're going to bring up guilds here in a second. Are we going to talk about guilds in a second? Yes. Calm down. We're going to talk about guilds here in a second, okay? So the rise of guilds and the return of trade, right? So, but then the late Middle Ages hit. So in the High Middle Ages, you saw trade is coming back, guilds are being established, but then in the late Middle Ages, economies are going to get hit severely, okay? So by things like the Black Death, the Avignon Papacy, which we'll talk about, put a star next to it and highlight it. We're going to bring it up in the next unit, right? So, or not next unit, but the next thing that we talk about. But the Avignon Papacy is very, very important. The 100 Years' War, a lot of different things are going to happen. But surprisingly enough, economies are actually going to leap forward after these things, right? So most historians argue that due to the aggressive downfall of populations, death of skilled artisans, and things like that, it led to a vacuum of economics leading to a period of exponential growth, right? So since you had oversaturated economics and stagnant economics in the Middle Ages, the fact that the death of a lot of these people, and then also the fact that like movement is going to be then re-encouraged following the death when people are trying to avoid getting sick or avoid warfare and things like that, it's actually going to lead to a leaping forward in economies, right? And after the late Middle Ages, guilds are going to be reestablished, right? So guilds are very important. And in the late Middle Ages, guilds are going to be kind of re-cemented as the economic making mad money organizations, right? And what they are is there are two types of guilds, as you can see, right? We have craft guilds and we have merchant guilds, right? So craft guilds are groups of people that get together to create a craft, to learn how to create that craft better from one another, set their price, and make mad money, right? So let's say hypothetically that I lived inside of a guild household, right? And inside of this guild household, what do we make, sweetheart?
What?
What do we make in our guild? What do we make?
We make poached eggs.
Okay, you can't make poached eggs in a guild. That's an egg.
We make dog collars.
Dog collars? But she is in our guild.
What?
She makes her own collars?
Why not? She makes them so that all the other dogs in the neighborhood can be fashionable.
Okay, apparently our guild makes dog collars.
There's a reason for every one of these guilds.
Oh, okay.
What do you want to make? Swords?
I didn't say swords. You said swords. And don't roll your eyes and say
What do you
swords.
wanna
That's
make?
actually economically viable.
What do you want to make?
What?
Bowls? No.
What? You're just yelling at me off screen right now. Bowls? I don't want to make bowls. Okay, fine. Dog collars. We'll go with dog.
Tables? What do you want to make? TVs?
TVs? Really? It's the Middle Ages, sweetheart. We're
I
making
didn't know-
TVs.
are
We're
these
making
modern-
TVs, Maria. Like,
These modern day guilds or no?
guilds don't exist anymore.
Yeah, they do. They're called clubs. Hobbies.
Hobbies? Hobbies is a hobby.
Like a mechanic.
Anyway, we're just going to go with the dog collars example that she threw out first. Okay, let's say hypothetically speaking that we have a guild in this household and our guild makes dog collars, right? So it's a craft guild, right? So we process and create something. Well, the way this works is you would look at somebody like me, right? I am a young man from a village and I don't want to work in the feudal system. I don't want to be a farmer. So what do? I move to a city and I find Miss Jersey, right? And Miss Jersey is like, she's very sleepy. She's like laying down on the floor, as you can see. She's a very terrible guild master. I'm not gonna lie. She sleeps on the job all the time. She doesn't really do what she's supposed to, but whatever, okay? So I find Jersey and I'm like, hey, Josie, I noticed that you make really good dog collars. I'm interested in joining your guild. So I would apply to join her guild. She would accept me in. And since she's the master of the guild, she would teach me how to create dog collars, make them, set the price, sell them bad boys, right? It's kind of basically, you know, technical school and technical college before they ever existed, right? So merchant guilds, on the other hand, are groups of traders that own several boats and they trade these items back and forth. Usually the products coming out of craft guilds, right? And you could have guilds for everything. In all reality, you didn't have dog collar guilds. You had guilds that made tools, like smithing guilds, or you had guilds that made barrels, right? There were barrel making guilds. You had also cobbler.
Coopers.
Huh?
They're called coopers.
Who?
Coopers.
Coopers?
Yeah.
Cooper's guilds, yeah, that make barrels. Good job, sweetheart. What's a shoemaking guild called?
Cobblers.
Cobbler's Guild. Look at her go. She's heard me do this flip multiple times, I guess. All right, now look. Big. She doesn't know what a shoemaker is. She thought it was some kind of pastry. All right, now, like, so, really quick, though, the beginning of the Renaissance is also going to see not only specialization in economics by guild workers and things like that, but you're also even going to see specialization by farmers, because farmers are going to begin to specialize their crops, right? So farmers, instead of growing everything, are going to start narrowing down their goods to grow certain things, right? Things like barley, wheat to make bread, beans, and things like that are going to be created, and farmers are going to begin to, like, you know what? Instead of growing a bunch of stuff that may or may not kill the dirt, I'm going to instead grow a few things that we know are going to sell well, right? City-states are then also going to become very specialized according to their location, right? So, for example, Venice is going to become a trade empire because it's on the coast and it's built on a canal system, right? That literally are those are people swimming in the canals of Venice, which is disgusting. I don't know why anybody would ever do that. Actually, this is when Venice flooded one time, and they're actually standing in the middle of it. That is gross. That water is very dirty. But also, they're going to become a trade empire because they're situated on the coast, right? And then you're going to also see places like Milan are going to become very, very large and powerful because they're situated in a pass that can get through the Alps and actually spread goods to the rest of Europe. Florence, on the other hand, is going to become a banking industry due to the fact that they are going to be centralized and centrally located near these other two prosperous money-making cities, right? So the state of Italy, though, looking at Italy in general in the Middle Ages, you have to understand that they are not a country, okay? This is not a country. It's not like Florence and Milan and Venice pay their taxes to one centrally located city in Rome. No, they're very politically divided, right? Now, we've already drawn this, so you do not have to do it again, okay? So we've already done this, okay? We've already done that. Have we already done that? Excuse me. We've already done that. Now, oftentimes, also, just so you understand, though, many times these cities would go to war with one another, right? Because they had established their own states, right? You had the Republic of Venice, you had the Republic of Milan, you had the Signory of Florence, or Tuscany is what it's called now. But this is not a country in and of the sense that you think of now. But there's one very powerful individual group that exists right smack in the middle, okay? And that's these people right here, the Papal States, okay? So if we're looking at this big swath of kind of peach eggshell color right there, that right there, those are the Papal States, right? A very, very important economic powerhouse that existed in Italy was known as the Papal States, right? The Papal States are Rome, okay? Rome is the center section of Italy governed and ruled by the Catholic Church ever since the era of Charlemagne, right? So ever since the 800s AD, there existed in the middle of Italy a quote-unquote country governed by the Catholic Church, right? So, and that was known as the Papal States. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of people always ask me, they're always like, well, Mr. Terry, how come the Renaissance, or why don't we talk about Renaissance growth and economics in the Papal States? Why do we talk about those three other northern cities like Milan, Florence, and Venice? Well, because you have to remember, Venice, Milan, and Florence are now creating economics, right? They are creating money flow, and they are bringing money into their respective cities and to their respective provinces through trade, being a trade hub, and then also textiles and banking, right? Look at my wife and I in Florence. Look how adorable we are. This is actually one of the only decent pictures of myself I've ever taken, and it's with a selfie stick, which was a very embarrassing moment, but at least it yielded a really nice picture, right? So, but they're creating economics. Look at this cathedral that I'm standing in front of. That right there is the cathedral of the Santa Maria del Fiore, which means the Saint Maria of Flowers, or Saint Mary, Mother of Flowers. And this is actually the building that, if any of y'all have started to research already, you know that the Brunelleschi's dome is on top of it, and those of you who are presenting on that, that's that building. But that building was created during the Renaissance because Florence was making money, right? The Catholic Church wasn't making money, they were collecting money in the form of the tithe, right? So they participated in the Renaissance, but not like these other three major players. They were just collecting it in the form of almost a taxation, right? So then you got to keep rolling forward, and you got to understand that where are all these ideas coming from, or what ideas resemble or like understandably like represent the Renaissance, right? Well, Renaissance, of course, as we know, means rebirth. We know it starts in Italy, but the big thing, though, is because of this rebirth of Greek and Roman ideas, right, of theater, of philosophy, of writing, of art, of sculpture, of architecture, of all these other things are going to be reborn in Italy, starting in Italy. You have to understand that the big thing, though, is that they're going to start thinking more like ancient Greeks and more like ancient Romans, and their ability to create and achieve and make more of themselves and live to their fullest potential, okay? Now, let's include a little note real fast, okay? Put a star underneath this, right? And put down, just for future reference, there were actually two Renaissances, okay? There's the Italian one, and then there's the northern one, okay? The Italian one comes first. The northern one comes very soon after, okay? Like very soon. Like we're talking within like 10, 20 years, okay? But that one, and they kind of move parallel next to each other, okay? So, but they both resemble the same idea, right? Thinkers are going to begin to re-examine old ideas. They're going to discover new ideas, and this is going to lead to the adoption of this concept known as humanism, right? Now, humanism is most visible in the explosion of art, right? So in the explosion of visual arts, architecture, and sculpture, right? That is usually why when you're looking at the Renaissance, you typically always look at its art, right? Because humanism and these concepts of a reinvigorated life and understanding of education and one's potential and one's quality, one's position in the educational community of Europe is going to be most evident in the explosion of like art, okay? Now, looking at this guy, for example, many of you have seen him before. That right there is the Vitruvian Man, right? The Vitruvian Man is a drawing from inside of one of Leonardo da Vinci's journals, okay? It is not an artwork he ever intended for anyone to see. He only wanted to make this so he could better scientifically understand the proportionality of the human body. And with this diagram and with this drawing, Leonardo da Vinci uses just simple mathematics and simple understanding to realize that a human's height is from fingertip to fingertip. That's right. If you were to hop up right now and actually measure your fingertip to fingertip, that is within an inch or two your height, right? So some of you are like, well, I knew that one already, Mr. Terry. Well, also, for those of you who don't know, proportionally speaking, your foot, which I do not want to put my nasty, unsocked foot up here, is literally as long as your wrist to the inside of your elbow. Your forearm is the same length as your foot. All right, so that is a really important thing because as Leonardo da Vinci is creating new artworks, when he's painting the Mona Lisa, when he's painting the Last Supper, when he's doing all these other amazing things, he needed to understand the proportionality of the human body to make the best representation of a human form that he possibly could, and that itself is humanism, right? That is humanism. So he draws the Vitruvian Man to understand that better, right? Because humanism is the study of worldly subjects. It focuses on individual growth and achievement as well. You need to highlight humanism like 800 times. It is literally the moniker, the billboard, the slogan, the everything of the Renaissance period. And with this, you have to understand that that study of worldly subjects, that individual achievement, that individual growth, okay, is going to lead to this concept known as the Renaissance man, okay? Because he can do everything. A Renaissance man is a writer. He's a musician. He's a linguist. He's an artist. He does everything because he's a student of humanism. He wants to be as good as he possibly can be, grow as much as he possibly can, and do as much as he possibly can, right? That is the Renaissance man, right? So the Renaissance, or woman, there was a Renaissance woman, Artemisia Gentileschi is one of the most famous. Now, but why Italy? Okay, so like, why is it Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo Buonarroti and Sandra Botticelli? Why is Italy the overwhelming center of the Renaissance period? Well, you have 5 reasons why, okay? 5 reasons why, okay? Let's list them, okay? Some of you are probably immediately seeing 1 and 2. Yes, you are right. 1 and 2 is very important, but 1, Italy was the home of the former Roman Empire. So, of course, you know when you're restarting all of intelligent life in Europe, you're probably going to start where things fell, okay? So, it is home of the former Roman Empire, so there's a lot of manuscripts and artifacts, and this is the second reason. There are tons of ruins and artifacts and other things in good condition for interpretation, translation, and other things like that. 3, you're going to see economics return to Italy first, right? Very, very heavily return to Italy first, okay? Got it? First. Then third or fourth reason why, because it's the center of the Roman Catholic Church, right? So you're also seeing the most money-making idea, individual entity and thing exist right there inside of Italy. So you have a lot of money flowing into the Catholic Church as well. So we have 4 reasons so far, right? Italy is the home of the former Roman Empire. Lots of artifacts and things around for good condition and study. You have northern Italian city-states and the return of economics. You have the Catholic Church being centered in Italy. And then also, last one, because the Black Death hit Italy first, right? So since it hit Italy first, it is going to relieve itself from Italy first, and then Italy is going to become the area where that growth begins, right? So with that, though, going forward, also, we know this already. Don't write that. That's been said like 800 times. Don't write this. Don't write this. Now, the European, though, continent also center for banking, okay? So that is like your 6th reason why, okay? Italy is going to become the European center for banking, right? With that, coupled with the fact that you have a massive amount of money coming into the Roman Catholic Church, you're now looking at the fact that there are families, a church, companies, operas. Opera means like a group of people, not necessarily like not like that. So big thing though, you got to understand that European continent, center for banking, you now have the growth of these people called patrons, right? So now that you have these people with all this money lying around, now they can finance things, right? So financial supporters, they're going to finance the Renaissance and give it power, okay? So patrons, instead of buying new like homes and new things and like, well, not new things, they are going to buy new things, new homes, and what Middle Ages individuals like spent money on was like suits of armor or like certain like titles and land holdings and things like that. Instead, in Italy, they're going to begin a new trend of buying things like for their house. For example, this is a really, really good example of patronage during the Italian Renaissance, right? It's the Cellini salt cellar, right? So look at this thing. This thing right here is a custom made by Cellini, who was a literal Renaissance sculptor. This was made for Francis I, the King of France, right? So that right there is a salt shaker worth $63 million, right? So that's the Renaissance in a nutshell. That's patronage, okay? Patronage in the idea of, I'm going to pay an exorbitant amount of money to an artist to make me a custom piece of art that no one else in the world has so I can show it off to all my friends, right? So that is patronage, okay? $63 million for a salt cellar. That's insane. So with that, though, the most famous patron family out of them all is, I bet you my wife knows what it is. Hey, sweetheart.
What?
Do you remember who the most famous patron family from Florence is? Look at her go. The Medici family, right? The Medici family of Florence. Everybody, when they're learning about the Renaissance, knows who the Medici are, right? The Medici family of Florence were the formal and informal rulers of Florence. They created the very first and most powerful bank in Europe, and they were huge patrons of Renaissance artworks, right? None more so than this guy right here. His name was Lorenzo Il Magnifico Medici, right? So he funded for Botticelli's works, The Birth of Venus and the Primavera. He let Michelangelo stay at his house. He paid for the David to be moved. Like, they did all these things. The Medici are a very powerful, very influential, very famous Renaissance family, okay? So do me a favor. Stop there. We're going to stop at this point. I'll see you guys when y'all come back from break, and I look forward to it. Y'all have a good one. Remember, quiz when we get back. Quiz when we get back. Don't forget. Y'all have a good one.